It is Friday morning, our second Women in Technology panel here at the Ahura AI House in Davos, Switzerland during World Economic Forum. Thank you so much for my panelists for joining us this morning. I know you guys must all be exhausted. This is the fifth day of this marathon that we call Davos. But why don't we start with everybody introducing themselves, talk a little bit about your background and what you're working on now. Do you want to go ahead and start?
Sure. So my name is Mahault Albarracin. I'm a director of innovations at Versus AI. We create generative models that are causal and not correlational. I have a PhD in cognitive computing, but my background used to be in social sciences.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming. And by the way, Versus is an incredibly world-changing company. I've been kind of coming up with Dan Mapes, who's a very dear friend of mine, who's one of the co-founders. I'm really excited about the work that you guys are doing, so congratulations. Tatiana?
Thank you so much, and likewise, also very excited about the work you're doing. I'm Tatiana Kazakova. I am the co-founder and chief strategy officer of Leaders on Purpose, and we are working on the transition and transformation towards new systems value creation and economies of the future. I'll go deeper into this during the panel. My background is actually master's in mathematics, and my PhD goes more into social sciences and strategic decision making. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm Julie Grimes Waldorf. I'm working with Carbonbase. We're building a next generation carbon registry on blockchain in Asia. The company's headquartered in Hong Kong. I am located in New York City. I'm actually the chief legal officer and the director of business development. I'm relatively new to technology. I've had a long legal career. I've worked with other tech companies, but I've worked with a wide variety of corporations. I've been general counsel of different companies, including the Vitamin Shop and Ford Models, the modeling agency, and have worked at big law firms. And so it's been very interesting making a full transition over to technology. We have been focused a lot on blockchain and climate change, but also we're starting to integrate AI into our work. And so I want to talk with you more about that later.
Absolutely.
Hello, my name is Amy Seidman, and I'm the founder and CEO of Noble Profit. We have been developing BFlow, which is a technology around truth. It's a deep tech that focuses on sustainability for business and investment. And my background has actually been as a creative. I had a design firm building some of the first websites in the entertainment industry as well as in the tech industry. I was a photographer and a filmmaker, and my unique brain grasped the web space and then the Web 2 and the Web 3. And I saw some things very early, and we're using different metrics and sustainability measurements to triangulate information, connect verifiable credentials, which are extremely important. Blockchain and verifiable credentials are absolutely important in truth within the AI space, and we are also integrating AI as well for ease.
Awesome. Well, so let's start with one of my panelists yesterday, Gregory Johnson, said something really interesting, that we in the AI space are now in our kind of Warhol moment, right? AI has been around for 50 years. Many of us have been working in the space for 20 years. But suddenly it's captured the public imagination, and because of some of the direct-to-consumer AI tools that have come out in 2023, over 500 tools that people are using. In 2024, it looks like that trend is continuing. We're past the point of inflection. The graph looks almost vertical. So as you guys are thinking about 2024 and technology, what are some of the things that you're seeing? And what are the trends that entrepreneurs and investors should be taking into account as they make decisions about their companies?
So I think the engagement of the public has really shifted. It used to be mild curiosity or media savvy people who would plug it in movies, for instance. Nowadays, they're starting to get engaged with real questions. How will this affect me? Why am I not invested in the conversation itself? So they're trying to get more and more engaged. So that's one of the trends. People need to be brought into the conversation, and that's partly why all of us are here. And as you can see, all of our backgrounds are very cross-disciplinary, because we realize that you don't need just one type of person looking at an algorithm. You need people with a mind that can capture the complexity of reality. One of the trends that you're going to see is that LLMs are limited. Lots of people are starting to add things to LLMs like vector databases and graphs. You're going to see new types of model emerge, become more powerful, more data frugal, and they're going to become accessible also through open science and open source models to people to try new applications that stem from their real needs.
That's brilliant. Tatiana, do you want to follow up with that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So we with Leaders on Purpose, what we focus on is really to identify purpose-driven multinational organizations and countries, regions that really drive a very non-incremental transformational approach towards the markets that they're creating and how they include population, sustainability, and environmental concerns into that. And so in this context, what we focus on is, and this will come to the trends, to really comprehensively understand what the economies will be that will govern our future. So all around AI, space, and other technologies, and here driving the engagement massively. Because to the one point, we see, of course, a deep convergence across all sectors to really realizing that we're entering a new age. So the same way how we went through the Industrial Revolution, the Digital Revolution, we are right now again at this tipping point where we have the opportunity to truly include every single citizen on this planet into the evolution of technology and participate, because this is also the promise of these technologies as AI that we have on the positive side, to be able to transcend into new economic systems so truly everyone can participate and go towards more creative enhancement. And so particularly investment into that direction, into businesses and technologies to really drive this kind of a positive change that is influenced and inspired by really a societal discourse. I think this is very significant, and this is where the world will judge you as well today.
Absolutely. Julie, what are your thoughts on the answer to the question, as well as what Tatiana and her just explained?
Sure, loved what both of you said. As I mentioned, we're working on a carbon registry in Asia. Asia produces the most greenhouse gases, yet and has the most projects to sequester carbon, and yet the need for the registry is very great. And we are leveraging technology. We're doing the registry on blockchain and are extremely excited about the prospects of using AI in the process. We've already started doing that, but a big focus of ours is verifying the carbon credits. And one of the big problems that we've seen in the whole industry, in the legacy carbon registries like Gold Standard and Vera, they've lost so much credibility by having credits on there that weren't verified and that weren't what they said, and companies have spent money and have looked really bad because what they have done is turned out not to be what they thought they were doing and helping the environment. And so I think AI can have a lot of potential to help with that. We also do consulting on sustainability and climate change and environmental issues, and we've already been using AI to help us look at data from different companies, which isn't always very transparent and is presented in different formats. Sometimes it's hard to compare the apples and the oranges, but to really see how the companies are stacking up and seeing areas where we think they really need to focus more on to be effective in reaching the goals. I think for climate change, we need all the help we can get. We need all the help we can get from AI, because this is such a huge challenge, and I'm very hopeful that AI will help us succeed.
Absolutely, and I want to double click on that. What are your thoughts on the need for capacity building? Because over the past couple of years, there's been an absolute ton of money that's been directed towards green initiatives and climate tech and so forth. But one of the things that we're seeing is even though there are a bunch of projects ready to go that are funded in around the world, especially in developing nations, oftentimes there isn't enough labor that understands how to effectuate those projects to support these climate goals. But what needs to happen to continue and build capacity all across the world to address these issues?
Yeah. Well, education is key on that, and I think this is where Ahura fits in as well. I think that that can be really key if we can even get your platform out to more people around the world, so that we will have the people on the ground who are able to help, exactly like you said.
Sure. Good.
Yeah, so I think another thing we need to consider is how to connect these people, not just educating, because that is extremely important, but a lot of people have the skills that others need and the data that they need, so it's about cross-collaboration, so you need the right platforms and frameworks to connect people properly, such that everything is made more flowing and effortless.
Sure. How does Versus help with that? Because I know with artificial intelligence, you can bring a lot of disparate data points together in really effective ways to surface those things, and I'm sure that you guys have a solution.
Yeah, well, we are creating a platform and a systematized language such that you can create a hyperspatial modeling language that is able to translate any type of data that can then render the AI models interoperable, but that can also allow other people that do not have the technical skills to translate their own unstructured or structured data into the right format that can then be translated to the AI models for people to use.
That's awesome. And Amy, I want you to jump in here. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I can touch on all these points. I really resonate with what Tatiana was saying around trust, around the corporate word and how important it is. And there's a lot of themes that we're hearing at WEF. So rather than talk so much about our company, because we relate to the dot connecting to the verification, we are potentially a feeder for your company and so on. But the big themes that we've been hearing have been around trust and the misinformation that and potential, especially with an election coming up. Apparently around the world we have 40 elections that are happening this year. So there is a trepidation, a lot of unknowns that are being looked at around. And that can bring all kinds of wonderful opportunities, and it can bring a lot of distress and mistrust. And I think the level of importance when you're going back to your original question of what do you see the trends in investment, I think that is one aspect that's super important. And in terms of the levels of investment, when I'm listening to the different investment groups talk, systemic investment from the wealth management side is something that's finally coming to the forefront. Everybody was running like the herd towards the new shiny object. And people are starting to realize that these things need to interconnect with the systems that exist today. And those systems are extremely complex, and it's no longer the pet projects of the very wealthy that can be, what they focus on, that they need to really support entities and new ideas. The other thing was that the New York Times debate, where Al Gore was one of the judges, the women were just phenomenal, talking about whether or not cooperation was dead or alive within our society. And there is this level of cooperation, but the big discussion is how we're on life support with the different systems that exist around democracy. So I think we're going to see a lot of unknowns happening and rolling out. And that, when we look at the wealth management side, that's one thing, and most of the money being deployed within these things I'm seeing are funds to funds. They're not necessarily in these new technologies or in already existing public companies. So going back to what your prior panel with Mary, what she was speaking about in terms of corporations being the part of the solution, when we look at the massive value chains that they have, as we put pressure on these corporations, having these kernels of trust with digital identities, with blockchain, with enabling us to sift through the incredible misinformation that will come from AI amid the beautiful solutions that we can have. I think it's going to be that sorting in the companies that can help do that, as well as education to kind of really get upskilled. And we're going to have a huge transformation with a lot of people worried about the lack of work. And so what do we do with ourselves, right? If AI were to take over and we have robots doing everything for us, wouldn't that be amazing? So it's a complex space.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to double click on that. And I want to turn to you, Tatiana, because of your work with Leaders on Purpose. You work with many Fortune 100s and Fortune 500s around the world, conveying how to have a purpose-driven leadership style that has had a massive impact. And we've seen the data. Companies that have female executives outperform ones that are all male by 20 to 30%. We see the results. And yet, it appears, given with the 40 elections that were happening this year, it appears as though DEI is also on the ballot box, right? There's a very public battle that happened between Bill Ackman and Harvard, and now Bill has been taking on the DEI infrastructure almost single-handedly, but there's people supporting him as well. What are your thoughts on that? How do you push back on this idea that that DEI can push away from a purely meritocratic system, even though we're seeing all this data around, in tech, only about 2% or 3% of venture money is going to female founders, in spite of the fact that they are so successful when you actually compare apples to apples?
Well, I think so. We with Leaders on Purpose, what we really focus on is to push forward, right? And I think this is what purpose-driven leadership is about. And then on the other side, just to give also a couple of trends, on the regulatory side, for instance, so purpose means the commitment to create systemic value beyond the traditional customer value proposition of the past. So with all the technologies and the evolvement and the evolution that we have today, what does that mean? Well, it means biodiversity is also available. Well, we know this now, right? Biodiversity bonds are coming. The oceans are available, are valuable. An elephant alive is more valuable than dead. So with these developments, actually our markets are increasing, right? So this is also one thing that is maybe not yet have been recognized, but from the investors in the capital markets, it's going already into that direction to realizing that actually this systemic approach to business is actually driving massive transformation towards bigger market shares and bigger markets that actually are better for everyone. These are absolutely driven and accelerated through technology and through AI, and absolutely also what you said, through upskilling. One of the major opportunities and issues that we have right now, but I think almost every Fortune 500 is investing right now into the skills to drive us into such a future, also of such business thinking, and at the same time to the front lines, to entrepreneurs, to build purpose-driven businesses that are in alignment with this future vision. And on top of that, on the regulatory side, to come back to that, we have already asset managers allocating of major pension funds really in alignment of the corporate purpose or the systems, the value proposition of these Fortune 500s, Fortune 100s, if they're going into this direction, because of course they look for the next 10, 15, 20 years, as well as insurers, right? So without an insurer, your big mega projects will not be backed anymore. So it's actually a very clear trajectory that we're going. I would say push back, push forward. Of course, this is a very politicized campaigns that we're going through, but we believe that data and the trends and the new markets will speak for themselves, really.
Oh, I had a little something to add to that. Looking at the numbers of women in tech, it is really abysmal. However, more girls and women are studying STEM in school and going into tech at some level. But one statistic that was really disturbing to me, I saw that in a McKinsey report that by age 35, over half of those women are not in tech anymore. Oh, wow. And as someone who had their first child at age 35, I feel like I do have a little bit of insight into that. And it is really hard for women to have just a super demanding career like many tech careers are if they do want to devote time to family as well. And at least when I was that age going through, I kind of had the idea that, oh, well, if I take time off, that just completely blows my career. I can't get back in. And I think we need to change that. I think that we need to make it much easier for women and men. I think it is great when men take off some time to help with the primary child rearing. I think we need to have many more on-ramps, especially though for women, to get back and not lose their careers because of time that they're giving to their families. And now, my son, I have two sons. They're 18 and 16. One graduated from high school last year and is doing a gap year. He got into Harvard, and I feel like, well, I did a good job. I don't want to blow it here at the end with the last one until they graduate, but I'm like, I'm going to be an empty nester soon, and my career is really going back full throttle. Then I'm going to go everywhere. And my older son is very into tech. He wants to do quantum computing, and one observation I've had is that, so the millennials now who are the mid-level managers, or, there are plenty who are CEOs too, like are terrified of Gen Z, Y, like getting canceled and whatnot. So Gen Y are the children of Gen X. I'm Gen X and have had 18 years of interacting with Gen Y now. So I feel like I know them very well and have insights that can be helpful to companies in working with the younger generation that's coming up, and feel like I'm valuable to them.
Absolutely.
So something that you raised is who's in the room. What's important is the media and who can then pull everyone up. As you may have seen, the younger generation has an interesting split right now. A lot of the younger males are going more Republican with more conservative beliefs, and a lot of younger women are going more progressive. So they are very much into the DEI initiatives, but the younger males are not. And you can see that being represented in the CEO rooms, in the C-suites. Most of the C-suite is not women, it's mostly men. And so that drives the culture of your company, which is why women drop out of technology. They feel the field is toxic. So there's two things we need to do. What we're doing here, putting the data out there, putting it in the media, actually having these conversations and broadcasting them such that it's not something we can hide. You know the facts. But also, we have a responsibility to pull other women up. A lot of the talks for women in WEF has been bring other women with you. Anytime there's a spot, try to bring a woman with you in the room. Not another man. It matters, it changes the culture, and it allows us to also bring new perspectives in the room, like the example of SheerTex. It's not just about having the right data, it's about having experienced it yourself and knowing that there's value there.
Absolutely, and to add to that, I mean, look, at Ahura, 40% of our executives are female, 45% of our team members are. One of the things Will I Am was talking about on the stage on Tuesday was what happens when people aren't in the room, when there isn't representation. So there's the old story of the soap dispensers. Initially, when they were delivered, black people had to get the soap this way. If they put their hand out this way, the soap would not come out, because when they were designing the mechanism to determine if a person's hand was underneath, there was nobody in the room that was black to say, hey, this doesn't work for us, right? Or there's a Google example of the facial recognition software, that AI, it was trained on mostly white males, and so it worked really effectively for white males, less well for females, and extremely poorly for people that had melanin in their skin, like myself or others. And so that can cause externalities. And so as we think about having representation and women in the room, especially when AI is being designed and implemented, what are the things that need to happen to get more women in the room? I mean, obviously, you're a PhD in AI, doing incredible work. We need to multiply that out, probably by a factor of 10. What needs to happen? What are the previous steps to get there? Because it's not going to happen overnight. There's
been a lot of initiatives to try to bring women in tech, and the truth is, honestly, women that come out with a diploma, it's roughly 50-50. There's a lot of women that could be in tech.
There's actually more. It's more women are graduating universities than men are now.
Exactly. It's really, the trend has shifted. The problem is really staying in the industry. So a few things can happen. We can reach out to organizations like MIA, who are upskilling women that come from different fields. We can bring in other kinds of expertise like ethics. We can train your engineers to understand what kinds of biases can come in at the level of building the actual model, not just afterwards, not as an afterthought. You can create communities that support each other. You can make sure that there are programs that support women that want to have a life and not just spend their whole life at work and end up at 50 being like, well, this has been nice. So yeah, those would be my suggestions.
That's brilliant. And Amy, what are your thoughts?
Well, I've heard it's really interesting, the topics, and yes, it's really abysmal that we are only 2% on the balance sheet. And one of, when we look at some of the trends, there's been initiatives going on for the past decade to have, 30% of the board being women. And certain countries have regulations that there should be 30% of the board being women. And when we look at what happened at COP, the new group that is behind the COP are, all men, all businessmen. So there is an uproar happening around this. But it really comes down to, and I hate to say it, I mean, we have the girls' club, but it is the boys' club. And I also feel a little bit of it is the nature of how people have been taught to show up within business situations. I know we've joked, and something I cannot say on camera that's maybe inappropriate, about the kind of the hubris that men kind of at times bring when they're in a certain part of the food chain of finance, and just coming in with a certain level of bravado and, I'm this, I'm that. And women come from a very different perspective. We're very collaborative. We're less one-upping as we are including. And the other day I was at a wonderful panel with top CEOs, not CEOs, but the president and CFO of Salesforce, brilliant woman, and she said, kindness is not a weakness. And I thought that was really important for people to really hear, because you can be misjudging somebody because they're coming with an intention and a tone and not coming with that bravado that the men might be really looking at. And they said, hey, if someone on your team is doing something, recognize them in the room. That is an incredibly important thing. So I think if the men, the more thoughtful men, the men who are more in touch with their feminine side, tend to be in that space. Someone like you, who is always recognizing people, and I love that about you. So
Well, I appreciate that. I don't know how feminine I am, but I appreciate the kind words. I do wear a lot of maroon, but so I can see why you would think that. One of the things in our last panel, Loretta said that I thought was really on point was, in order to have a lot more investment in female-led companies or companies that have female co-founders and executive members, we need more female VCs. And so if you look at the numbers of venture capitalists, the majority of them are male in the highest positions. So what are some things we could do to either incentivize or promote more women founding venture capital funds and being able to then deploy that capital? Because famously we know that people generally invest in people that look like themselves, right? So we have the same issue around investment into companies that have African American leadership or brown leadership and so forth. There's this natural human thing that just happens where when someone looks like you, it's much easier to connect with them unless you really do the work to step outside of that and realize we're all human, we're all part of the same family. So what do you think needs to happen there to create more of those venture capital firms that are led by women?
If I may, if I may jump onto this by building also to what Amy said before. From our perspective, it's also very clear the responsibility and the ability of leadership, because something that we want to promote in our world right now is also the leadership that got us to this point where we are today needs to be upgraded. This means also strategic decision-making in the rooms, the way how we empower teams, the way how we organize ourselves, the way how we assess risk and opportunities needs absolutely to change and to shift, and also in the VCs, right? And from the investment perspective to understand, okay, how do we actually assess risk right now? Is it a more holistic approach, or is it an approach based on certain conditions that maybe have been informed by a by a different perspective on where we need to go? And so here, I think really embracing and empowering a very upgraded new leadership style and technique, no matter in which organization you are. And this can be and mean, of course, to lift other women also up, but actually really understanding the implications of the strategic decision-making processes that will get you there where you want to go, because this is right now the new age of economies that we're building in the company. So they need a new leadership style, and this goes directly into diversity.
Absolutely. I know both of you guys want to jump in on that. Who wants to get first?
Okay. One thing I wanted to point out, I love all of the women helping women and getting together and all of that, but women also need men who are mentors and allies. And frankly, when I've been here at Davos, I haven't really been going to the women things, because in my mind, these are the most powerful men in the world who have this power and money and can influence things and can give money to companies led by women. And there are plenty of great men out there. We need to be networking with them. Like, when you have the opportunity, like, don't be afraid to, I feel like we're here, we can hang out with the big boys now and make those connections. I think that's really important for women. It is important that we support each other and stick together, but we've also really got to get out there and make those connections, because those are the people that are funding the startups and the companies and the new VCs, and they need to know you and feel comfortable with you, and that can come from one-on-one interactions and getting to know people on a personal level. So I think that's something we really need to not overlook and focus on that with the men who are allies.
So, exactly, building on that, two things. One, yes, allies. If there is an ally in the room, he can help create a fund, start a fund that's women-led and be some kind of angel in the background. Second thing is subsidies. You can't invent capital. Most of the capital is held by these men, which means we need to be subsidized potentially by governments to be seeded into a new VC fund that will have a little bit more momentum this way, and potentially even crowdsourcing. I'm sure a lot of women would be willing to pool funds for women-led venture capital.
That's brilliant. So,
I just wanted to point out something that, here we are talking about diversity and melanin and things like that, and we're all white women, right? I think we need to have women of color, of all ethnicities that are also included. And from that, when you're talking about people investing in one another, and we're looking at all this polarization, I met a fabulous woman, who's an African American at the top of the food chain, and she's deliberately investing in African women. And that is exactly what she should be. But I do believe that also lends itself to this global polarization where we go into these tribes, we go into these camps, and this sense of cooperation, this sense of mentorship, the sense of allies, and letting everyone know that we stand for you and being behind you is something really important. So we have to include in those figures, because one of the figures that I did hear the other day is that out of all of the women, or all the investment, if we get 2%, I think the people of color get 0.0006%. It was like an astonishingly ridiculous number. So I just wanted to include that.
yeah, absolutely. And as a person of color, I totally understand what you're saying. And in the last panel, we had POC, and throughout the week, we've had quite a bit of that, because I do think it's really important. I'm going to ask a slightly uncomfortable question, especially double-clicking on one of the things you were talking about. So a couple of years ago, Scaramucci was speaking at the Equality Lounge right here in Davos. And one of the things he was talking about, and I want to get your perspectives on this, especially around what you were talking about around getting male allies and engaging with in the business world. One of the things he was talking about is conversations he had, because he runs Skybridge Capital, and so he works with quite a few investors as well as lawyers and so forth, that one of the outcomes, one of the unintended consequences of Me Too was that a lot of men stopped taking private meetings with women. If they had a meeting in the office, the door would always had to be open. Men will often take women out for, male colleagues out for coffee or steak dinners to discuss work and so forth. And for the most part, what he was saying, and I don't know if this is true or not, this is data that he was sharing with people, is that that dropped off precipitously because a lot of men then said, hey, this is off limits, I could get in trouble, and so forth. So what can we do now that the pendulum kind of swung to reverse that? Because we know that in order for the mentorship to work, in order for the continued upward mobility, there has to be that camaraderie. People have to take you under their wing and so forth. And given that many of these executive positions are held by men, what can we do to make it safe for them to do so and incentivize men to take more women under their wing? This is for everybody.
I'm going to start with the most uncomfortable answer, probably. I don't know any man that is actually scared that has done anything wrong. So most of the men that are here in this room are not scared to have a private meeting with a woman. Because the truth is, it's not that hard. You can have a conversation with a man and not sexually harass him or ask very weird questions to them. I had many men in my surroundings ask me questions about my sexual life in a business meeting. That's not an okay question to ask. It's just not. So one thing we can do is reestablish very clear ground rules such that the table is set. But it should not be hard to have a private meeting with a woman. Most of my male mentors have never had an inappropriate interaction with me. They know how to talk to a human.
Yeah, I would say I absolutely agree with you. I would, yeah, I see this, it's a very fascinating perspective of moving this conversation towards, victimizing the, maybe the male counterpart. I must also say, it's a conversation from a human to a human, and this is, of course, the ideal world that we want to get into. I would also say there's probably no woman here in Davos ever that has not been working with allies and with men, right? Mm-hmm. So I think none of us really, we all grew up in that. I was like the 1% studying mathematics at my university, and a corporate strategy consultant was almost the only woman going into the plane into the morning and being in those boardrooms. And frankly as well, it's also a cultural difference, I must say. My start of my career was in Europe, very different to what I've experienced in other cultures. And of course, there were like directions that, all us women have definitely had experiences that will speak to what you just said. But also on the other side, it's very clear when it's clear. And it's very clear when it's content and when it's a conversation from human to human on the basis of respect, mutual respect, and confidence in skills and competencies. So I think we just need to keep really evolving based on those ground rules. And not look at this even from a perspective in the narrative that this pendulum is shifting into that direction.
That makes sense.
I want to be supportive of what you're saying, and so what I'm saying, I don't want to detract from that because I do agree with what you're saying. I also, though, feel like everyone needs to be less offended in general and just not so easily upset by things, like brush some things off, give people the benefit of the doubt. I think sometimes people say things without really thinking about how it comes across, and maybe their intent wasn't really as bad as it seemed. And I know we all misspeak sometimes, and I'm a believer in giving people the benefit of the doubt. And there are obviously situations that are just beyond the pale, but we're all human and we all make mistakes. And I do feel like there are, so many men out there who are very good intentioned and want to help women. I have 2 sons, and I feel like boys have kind of a tough time now. And like these boys didn't do any of these aggressions that have happened in the past. And I do just want to put on the table that it's hard for them. And boys and men aren't actually doing as well as women now, at least in academics, all the way in school. I mean, I know it's very different at the higher levels, but I just wanted to put that out there to think about, and that we should all, just try to give people the benefit of the doubt instead of being easily offended.
Definitely have some stuff to say on these topics, but absolutely. So I think what you brought up is that it's an incredibly confusing landscape. And there's a number of things, and they're extremely opposite, every single one of these things that I have to say. I have to counter what you're saying, because I have been in situations directly where I have been completely just slimed by people who feigned themselves to be out there for me. I have also had an enormous amount of male mentors who've been incredibly polite to me. When I was early on in the web scene, I had wonderful doors open to me, and those doors were to go out on a date, and I think I'm going into a business meeting. But because they thought I was sexy or cute at the time, 20, 30 years ago, I got a lot more of those kinds of meetings, and it was so offensive and upsetting that, and they just turned off. They had nothing, it didn't even think of even approaching me about the whole topic that we were going to be meeting. And to this day, I meet different levels of men, and some of them are, hey, baby, you know, doing all of that, and then some of them are very polite. And I think it makes it extremely confusing for men, extremely confusing on even how can we meet people, to your point, of like what is the proper thing? And we're having an epidemic of loneliness at the same time, where people are really disconnected. And that creates an echo chamber of dissonance for how do you approach a woman? How do you let them know that you have feelings for them? And I would just say to come in every moment with respect, because we all want to have relationships. And a lot of times you meet people at work, but don't undermine a woman and give her false expectation or abuse her. If you have feelings, find a way to respectfully let them know if that door is to be opened. But at the same time, if you have a very clear meeting, don't be taking that meeting to have another alternative. So thank you for all of your perspectives, because I think there's pieces in it that are truth, and I feel for your boys, but it is a very confusing landscape for all of us. So,
a specific tip for boys that I found super interesting. There's lots of videos out there giving tips on how to approach and how maybe to, most of all, make yourself safe and show that I'm going to give you my number. I'm not going to take yours. You have the power now. You can decide to talk to me, or you can decide to ignore this. And it's a much safer approach to show someone I have interest, but now I'm backing off, and you take the power back.
We've had a lot of, across the week, a lot of fiery conversations. It's actually been, I think, something we're getting to known for, because I hate having panels where everyone just agrees with each other. So I feel like we got into the fiery stuff. But let's go back to tech for a moment. Let's talk about AI again. Look, this is probably one of the most profound technologies that's having a massive impact on every element of society. So I want to go back to thinking through the areas where you guys have expertise. Where do you see a lot of the opportunities for the up-and-coming founders and CEOs, and what should people be paying very close attention to as they're building? So famously, there's a video of Sam that leaked from YC where he said, hey, all the founders need to understand that AGI is just around the corner. So if you're building a company, you need to take that into account. What are other things that you would say to other up-and-coming founders?
Well, I would encourage them to work on climate tech. And one opportunity for women in particular, the IRA, there's so much, the Inflation Reduction Act, there's so much money out there. We need to figure out how women can get more of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would also say, exactly to your point, how can we not just be a processing and jumping on the trend of AI, but what is it actually what we're creating? Because I think right now the founders of today that are coming in are building the companies of the future and the industries of the future. So you have a huge responsibility, but also a huge opportunity, and you're writing history actually today by doing so. And so with that, really being incredibly smart about how realizing how many of our population will be onboarded into that market that your company will be penetrating, right? And actually go and create the market. So don't just deliver to a market that exists right now, but be really very future-oriented and realize a market, because this will be just then also just around the corner.
Deep tech, pay pay attention to deep tech. Don't pay attention to the thing that's already hyping, because the probability is that if it's hyping at this level, it may stay there. Try to pay attention to the most edge technology that leverages, say, model-based approaches, such that what you want to do is take the seed of an approach and let it grow on its own. That's going to be AGI.
Brilliant.
Sustainability and AI, definitely agree, are the tickets. These are the places and the trends. But I also want to say, having that in mind, the most important thing is finding what you resonate in your heart, because you're going to need a lot of passion and you're going to need a lot of that to keep you moving forward. And if you pick a topic that you're like, this is going to make me a lot of money, you're probably going to fail, because somebody else is really going to love what they're doing, and you need that to move yourself through. So yes on the AI, yes on sustainability, and find the path of heart.
Awesome. Now we are out of time, but we will give everybody 60 seconds for their final thoughts.
It's been really inspiring to see the variety of perspectives that we had, and most of all, the purpose-drivenness of all of us, from climate to sustainability to equity and ethics. I think we all need to mostly get involved in the things we care about, such that we can truly bring a unique perspective and eventually represent everyone, such that it's not just one voice in the room, but all of our voices to bring a more harmonious future forward.
Amazing. Thank you.
What makes me very excited about our panel here, about what you have been doing here with Ahura, and Davos, the conversations in general that I've participated in, is the convergence of truly a systemic view, of systemic value creation, of new economic models and systems and industries that are just about to rise, and how we really collectively can come together and shape this. It really feels almost like a convergence also of science, right? And I think this is the opportunity as well of AI. It brings us all truly closer together if we embrace that. And so you are writing history today if you are leading this transformation.
Amazing.
Well, I want to thank you for bringing us together, and I'm so excited to get to know my fellow panelists. I, though, want to encourage everyone to work on climate and get AI to help us in this, because the time is so short and we've really got to find the solutions right away. And if we can get AI helping with that, hopefully we can speed up the process and save us all and save the world.
Absolutely.
On that note, I'd like to encourage everyone to get involved in training and bringing the values into AI, because only 5% of humanity is actually evil. And if we can take the rest of us and we can put forth, the things and the values that we need. There's also a lot of conflicting values, but for us to be the mothers of it, even if or the mothers and the fathers, and also to look at the diversity of your portfolio and lift women into positions. Believe in them. We are a good bet.
Very cool. Thank you all for joining us today. I appreciate you guys sharing your expertise and your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And,